Hey crazy friends,
Hey guys!
it's Jay and Francis with Find Your Crazy. We are a family of 9 who live full-time in our RV with 6 of our kids as we travel the country to see every national park. And today we're going to talk to you some more about Yellowstone National Park.
A
That's right, this is our
favorite.
part 2 family tour guide for Yellowstone National Park. If you missed our last video, we talked all about what we saw from the north entrance. This time we're going to tell you everything that we saw from the west entrance. Stay tuned. So as we shared in our last video, Yellowstone is so huge that you really kind of have to break it up into pieces. And for us, the easiest way to do that was staying in multiple places in the park. And so we stayed for several days in the north entrance and saw some things up there, and we shared all that in our last video. And then we stayed outside of the west entrance, and we saw some very iconic things there. In fact, I would say the stuff that we saw at the west entrance is the more iconic things that you think about
when you're thinking of
Yellowstone, because that side of the park is all of the geyser basins with all of the different hydrothermal features that you're going to see. So when we shared in the last video, there are a couple of amazing things about Yellowstone. Because of where it sits, all that heat underground, it expresses itself in these hydrothermal features, which is hydrothermal hot water coming up out of the ground, but it comes up in lots of different ways. In fact, there are 4 main types of features for hydrothermal features. The first one is the one that we all know about, and that's geysers, like Old Faithful, where the water kind of boils in a big pit underground, comes through a real narrow opening, so it sprays up in the air.
Our
so
kids
that's
love
probably
that.
the most iconic. But then there's also the hot springs, which we know about, are those big pools that have all those beautiful colors in them. And they have all those beautiful colors because of that hot water. At each different temperature layer, a different microorganism grows and comes out in a different color.
Almost
so
like rainbow
colors. Then you also have the mud pots, which were our boys' favorites. And so that's
muddy, stinky, dirty.
Yeah, that's when the water comes up through and basically turns the mud into the dirt into really thick mud, and so it bubbles and it smells like sulfur sometimes.
It sounds interesting as well. Our kids had lots of fun with that.
Sometimes it spews mud out. Pretty neat. And then the last one is fumaroles, and so that's when steam comes up, and instead of like a geyser water spewing out, basically the steam just comes out the hole, and it makes a sound. It sounds like a jet engine, either like a little small one or a really big one with some of the ones we saw. And the great thing about going up and down that west side of the park to all those geyser basins is you're going to see multiple examples of
lots
every
of them.
single
From
one
small ones to large ones. You're going to really get the full gamut, and so you really want to see all of them as much as you have time for.
Yeah, you definitely want to see a lot of them, because these 4, it's not like you've seen one, you've seen them all. Just because you've seen one geyser doesn't mean that it's going to look anything like the next one. Just because you've seen one hot spring doesn't mean it's going to look anything like the next one. And so we found that every single one we saw, there was something unique about it, something that our kids pointed out. Oh, that one looks like this. Oh, I like this one. And so you're definitely going to want to take a lot of those boardwalk trails. But the nice thing about Yellowstone is because the thermal areas are pretty susceptible to damage from people walking on them, almost all of them have built-in boardwalks, which means there may be a few steps, but for the most part, they're pretty easy. They're pretty level,
all ages,
pretty easy walking.
Yeah, just make sure your kids don't get off of them. You'll see plenty of signs there, because it is very dangerous if you were to come through, because some of that groundwork is very, very brittle, and you literally can fall down below because you don't know where kind of these caverns have been narrowed out and hollowed out. And so be really careful with your dogs and with your kiddos, and make sure you all stay safely on the boardwalk.
So as you're driving into the park, there is a long way to drive. It doesn't matter where you're staying in Yellowstone. The roads, you're not going to go fast. You're going to plan on a couple of animal traffic jams, and so you're not going to get anywhere fast. And so you're going to have some time to kill. And we suggest that you download Gypsy Guide Tours. We've talked about this in a bunch of our different
hands
videos.
down favorite app that we
So
use.
it's a GPS enabled app that tracks where you're driving along and shares information specific to where you're at. And we've shared in different videos at other parks different reasons why we really liked it, different aspects of it. But here at Yellowstone, it's hands down the information. Everything I just told you about all those different 4 types of geysers,
learned from Gypsy.
we learned from the Gypsy Guide Tour. And our kids enjoyed it. Just hearing the different stories about how the park was formed and who discovered it first, and then specific information about the individual geysers or the individual hot springs. You will not regret having this on your phone as you drive.
Yeah, and if you have children or grandchildren or just for yourselves, the amount of history that you're going to learn, but also the amount of geology and biology and zoology that you're going to experience there, you're going to come out of that park knowing far more than you could have ever known any other way. And it's intriguing, it's engaging, and it's just a lot of fun to listen to.
So we're going to start basically at the top, kind of work our way down of the geyser basins that we saw. So the first one that we saw, which is the one that's the furthest north, is Norris Geyser Basin. And really, all of the geyser basins in their setup are very similar in that along the rain route, you're going to have a parking lot that you can pull over in, and you're going to have a little walk to get on that boardwalk and then basically walk around the boardwalk to see everything. So all of them pretty much have that exact same setup. But what's unique about each one are the features that are there. And so when we were at Norris, I would say by far the thing that was most unique to Norris were the fumaroles. We saw the coolest, loudest, closest fumaroles that we saw there of any other basin. Black Growler, I think was the name of it. And it lived up to its name for sure. I mean, they told us ahead of time that it was going to sound like a little jet engine. It sounds like a little jet engine. I mean, it's not that deafeningly loud, but that's exactly what it sounds like, kind of fuming up out of there. And our kids just love standing there, seeing the steam pour out of them, and hearing that really, really, really loud sound. So check it out. So once we finished at Norris, we continued our drive south and came across our next must-see, which is the Lower Geyser Basin. And this one was pretty unique in that it was really kind of divided into 2 parts. And so on one side of the road, it had that kind of standard setup of a geyser basin that we've talked about, where there's the parking lot and the nice boardwalk that went out and around all the features. But what this one has is on the opposite side of the road, there is actually a drive. It's called Firehole Lake Drive. It's a one-way loop drive. It's not very heavily trafficked, which we found kind of interesting.
Very nice.
But once we got out there, there were points where we couldn't even see another car. And you get to drive right next to a lot of these thermal features. In fact, we were lucky enough to see a couple of geysers even going off while we were driving through it.
Yes, that was what Joseph had wanted. We had seen Old Faithful, but then he wanted to see one more up close and a different one. And we turned the corner and wow, we got to see one. It's so different, and they're all unique in the way that they erupt and the times that they erupt and just the manner in which they spray their water. It's really, really beautiful.
And then at the end of the drive, of course, is Firehole Lake, which is a huge hot spring. And I mean, it just bellows out steam. And we were coming across them. You could hardly see down the road. And as we turned the corner, here comes a bison walking right through the mist. So that was pretty so iconic seeing that right there. But what we'll say is the feature that stands out the most there, this is the place that we saw the neatest mud pot, and that is Fountain Paint Pot. And it is just they're really unique. We learned a couple of things while we were there. One, depending on the time of year that you go, depends on exactly how thick the mud is, and so it depends on if it's kind of boiling more like water or just bubbling like that mud that you think of. And then it even affects the coloring of it, and so you get these rich colors. It's not just like mud brown, where we're from Georgia, so everything's red clay. That's not at all what it looks like.
No.
You definitely want to stop by and see that.
For sure.
And then we learned something a little fun there. We were blessed enough one night to be able to take a date night. And so we went back into the park and got to experience Lower Geyser Basin at sunset.
Oh, and that was just such a beautiful opportunity to do that. Our older daughter who travels with us just said, you guys love Yellowstone. You haven't had a date night. You should go. So there's a little taco truck in the town of West Yellowstone, and we stopped by there and we got some to go because the sun doesn't wait for anybody to set. And so we rushed in and we hit it perfectly, and we had it all to ourselves. There was hardly anybody else there at all, and we just got the most beautiful sunset with the geysers and the fumaroles and just all of the smoke. It made a sunset even more magical and mystical because of all of the steam, and it was a date night we will never forget.
So that's definitely our next family pro tip: is you need to find, it doesn't have to be Lower Geyser Basin, but you need to find one that you take the time to go back into.
Go back to the park at sunset. No matter where you are, sunset will be beautiful, and you might want to take a couple of nights, but do that because it really makes a difference to see the park at sunset, and in the evening it changes completely.
So once we finished up there, we were ready for our next must-see, and in fact, it's probably the most iconic must-see, and that's Upper Geyser Basin because of
Old Faithful.
There is so much more to see there than just Old Faithful, but obviously you don't want to go and not see Old Faithful.
You gotta go.
Well, but one of the interesting things, this is our next family pro tip, is to get the Yellowstone app, because iconically enough, Old Faithful is not as faithful as you would think.
No.
There's like an hour, give or take, depending on it's, they can predict it pretty well. It's based off of how long it erupts, how long it is until the next one. So it's not like it's every 45 minutes.
Right.
There's these windows.
You gotta get the app so that you know.
But the amazing thing about the app is they have about 7 geysers on there that they put the time frame. So it's going to be at 1:50 plus or minus 5 minutes, or 3 o'clock plus or minus an hour, depending on which geyser it is.
Sort of feel like you're at Disney World and you have like the Disney app and you're like, we gotta go, we gotta go. The geyser's going. You're like rushing to the next one. Yeah, you feel a little bit like Disney World because it's like on the schedule.
Tons of great information on their app. Tons of great interactive maps that you can download. So even when you're offline, you can access them. But by far, that geyser timer is the best one for Old Faithful. And so then when you're ready to go see Old Faithful, here's our next family pro tip: go early.
Yes.
But because everybody wants to see Old Faithful, everybody wants to see Old Faithful. And so it packs in big time.
Right.
So we actually got there 30 minutes before the predicted time, and we were able to get a seat actually over on the side, which was great because there were a lot less people. Just realize around the, there's a loop of seats around it, but there are some kind of rises out in front of it. So some seats are better than others.
Yes.
But get there a little bit early. We got a front row spot.
Yeah, and don't forget that you need to see which way the wind is blowing, because it really does matter. Because if the wind is coming towards you,
all you're going to see is steam.
All you're going to see is steam. And so you really do kind of need to look at
That's a good
which
call.
way the wind is going and where the seats are, so you can make sure that you get the best spot. And if you have kids, you want to be there early, because if people start to pack in, there's rows of people, and you really want to make sure that those little guys can see, because even though it goes high, it's just a little spurt if not. So we did get there early, but you know what? The cool thing is there are lots of little shops, and there is some, it was really cold that day, so we got hot chocolate, I got snacks, and I was so glad that I did, because that made the time go by so much faster, and we really kind of filled that time that we're just waiting. But super, super important to get there early.
And we had a surprise visitor during our Old Faithful eruption. And so we were sitting there, and Old Faithful, when it goes off for about 10 minutes. It kind of, there's a little bit of geyser, and then it calms down, and then there's a big one, and then it calms down, and right in the middle of that, all of a sudden we see all these people kind of out of the corner of our eye, like moving back, and we see this park ranger coming around, and they're like, everybody needs to move, everybody needs to move. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We're watching Old Faithful. And then we look up, and here, walking across Old Faithful, comes a big old bison. That's right.
It's like he just had planned it. It couldn't have been more iconic than that moment. And here he comes across, and right in front of this plume of smoke and water, here he comes across, just as slow, meandering as he could, just in control of the whole park. And not only that, so number one, it was really hard for the park ranger, because everyone is in the same place at the same time. So these poor park rangers,
like probably the most densely populated place in the park at that moment,
and no one wants to leave, and then they all want to take pictures of the bison, who is beautifully pictured in this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see him with this backdrop of Old Faithful. No one wants to leave Old Faithful. We've waited a long time, and no one wants to leave this bison who is there. Everybody's trying to take pictures and video, and they're doing everything. And then once they got us moved out of the way, one of the funniest things I thought was he stopped right by the sign, Old Faithful sign, and begins to like scratch his ear. And so here's this huge bison next to this perfect sign of Old Faithful. It was hysterical. Really, it was so much fun to watch.
Lots of fun. And so obviously Old Faithful is, you know, the prime geyser. It's also the most predictable, so it's also the easiest one to see. A lot of the other ones have
biggest bang for your
wait
buck
time
too.
of like plus or minus an hour. One of them is like 3 hours. And so it's just the easiest one to see. And so by far it was the best geyser that we saw, even though we got lucky enough to see about 3 erupt. But while you're there in that geyser basin, you also want to see what we thought was the most impressive hot spring that we saw, and that was the Morning Glory hot spring. The colors in it were just unbelievable. I mean, so iconic, almost that
You've
rainbow
seen tons of pictures of it, the different colors from the inside, that really beautiful dark blue going out into the yellows, and it is beautiful, but you gotta want it.
Yeah, it is. So where you park is right beside Old Faithful, where all of the Hotel Faithful Inn, all of those things, the shops and stuff are. And the Morning Glory pool is the furthest feature away.
Yeah, we didn't really realize that when we started our trip.
So it's a pretty good jaunt out there. I mean, it's well worth it. There are tons of hot springs and geysers,
so much more to see than
things
just
to see
that one.
right along the way, and so it was well worth it. We just didn't quite plan for the amount of time and the length of the walk that it was going to be. So make sure that you examine that, and that you're just planning for a little bit longer
several miles round trip. So the loop that we took, and there might be other loops that you can take or other better ways to see it, but the loop that we took was, I don't know, a couple of miles, maybe 2 to 3, maybe plus miles. And so it was a really big walk, and I think it was the problem was it was a walk that none of us were prepared for. So our kids weren't mentally ready for that. We had waited a while. I'm really glad that we gotten hot chocolate and some hummus and some snacks like that, because we did not prepare. And so I would say one of the family pro tips is, if you're going to take that trek from Old Faithful to the Morning Glory pool, you need to make sure to have some snacks. You need to take your water, because even though it was nice and cool that day, we were completely unprepared. And so make sure that if you take it, you kind of are prepared for how long it's going to be, and make sure you bring the snacks.
But don't be afraid to get too hot or tired on that walk, because when you get back to the Yellowstone Village, you are in for an amazing treat. You have got to stop by and get some
Huckleberry fudge ice cream.
That is for sure our next family pro tip. It is some of the best ice cream that we have ever had. We had heard, this is so funny, so all the way back in Georgia when we started our trip, and we were talking to some people that had been to Montana, or a couple that had lived in Montana, and we asked them what we needed to do over and over again. You got to eat huckleberry ice cream.
We're like, huckleberry? What is a huckleberry?
So we did some research, and so a huckleberry is kind of like a small red blueberry, but it's not a blueberry. We heard some people say, "Oh, it's just a blueberry grown in a specific place." No, it's a unique fruit. As a little red blueberry. Well, it's a little red fruit like a blueberry. It's not a little red blueberry. And
anywho,
when you mix it with ice cream and mix it with fudge,
whatever, it's amazing. Our kids loved it. But not only is the ice cream good, let me just tell you something. All the huckleberry things, just get them all. Get the soda.
The huckleberry soda was pretty amazing.
What in the world? That was delicious.
Had it on tap at the fountain there.
And there's a shake. You can have that. It's amazing. And really, everything huckleberry, just get it all. Get all the things huckleberry. You can even get you some cute little shorts with huckleberries on it. You can do whatever you want. It's all huckleberry there. So make sure you don't miss that. I don't care if it's in the morning, lunch, or dinner. Just eat the ice cream for sure. What are we doing, Boo?
Watching Old Faithful.
We waiting for Old Faithful?
What's it gonna do?
Hey, Sky. Is it warm out here?
No, it's freezing.
What you got going on in that cup?
Hot chocolate.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Nice.
Huckleberry ice cream.
What kind of ice cream?
Huckleberry.
Huckleberry ice cream.
I got the huckleberry. It's really good.
It's really good.
Ice cream.
Is it?
It's got chocolate in it.
It's got chocolate in it?
Yeah.
Wow. You give it thumbs up or thumbs down?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
So that was all the fun we had at all those amazing geyser basins up and down that west gate. And so again, as we said, if you've got a day, go spend a day. If you've got a week, go spend a week. There's so many unique things to see. That's just one of the unique things of Yellowstone. It's unlike those other parks. There's not a time frame. Whatever you've got, spend it there. You won't see the same thing twice, and you won't regret it. And so once you're done with all that, you may want to take home some souvenirs.
Yes, and let me tell you what. I don't propagate a whole lot of souvenirs because we really don't do that. We're going to have a whole video on what we do with our kids and how we deal with souvenirs and how we keep in budget on that. But this time I have something that I've been waiting for this video to share because it is the best thing that we've ever bought in one of the stores. So we went to the bookstore. We were just looking around at all the different items that they had. And I was looking for something. I was like, what are we going to get for the kids? Is there a little something? This is Yellowstone. This is kind of the big one. What are we going to do? And so so we found this water bottle, and this is Path Water, and they have these here, but it is a metal water bottle, and it's filled with water. It is $2.50. $2.50 in the bookstore. And this we use every single day with our children. It is a 20 ounce. It has Yellowstone, the bison, which we saw in front of Old Faithful. This was perfect. And so it has Yellowstone National Park, Old Faithful. It has a cool picture on the front, and it was $2.50, and it was already filled with water. And we just rinsed it out. There's a top on it. We don't have it right now, but the top on it. And I will tell you, if you want something to take home for your kids that is usable, but also will remind them of Old Faithful, check in the bookstore and get this water bottle. You will not regret it. We love it. We write our kids' names on it, and every single one of them, including me, has one of these water bottles.
So that's it for this video. If you'd enjoyed it, found something helpful, then give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, we'd love for you to do that. You can enjoy other family tour guides for other national parks that we've been to, as well as our weekly RV family life videos where we share all about how to live in an RV full-time.
With a lot of people.
Also on Sundays, our Crazy Faith segments where we just share what God's doing as we travel along this path as well. And so if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and you won't miss a thing. And if you want to see our playlist of all of our other family tour guides, then click on that down there. And until next time, go out and have some crazy fun with your crazy family.
Bye, guys.